My father refused to walk me down the wedding aisle and chose a trip to Hawaii with his favorite daughter instead. But just a day before the wedding, he changed his decision because of something I did. So, I'm 26, and my wedding is this week. With only 5 days left until the ceremony, I'm already drowning in drama, and all thanks to my sister and father. For context, my father has been our sole parent for the last 10 years, as my mother passed away from cancer when I was 16. It was an incredibly difficult time for all of us, but especially for me because I realized I no longer had my mom's support. This gave my sister the opportunity to boss me around as she pleased. While our mom treated us equally, my father had a clear soft spot for my sister after mom's death. She could get away with almost anything. My sister, Katie, is 2 years older than me and is the most annoying and spoiled person I know. As a child, she treated me like her servant. Every time I protested, my father would tell me to just do what she wanted because, apparently, she was too fragile to do things herself. It was all an act, I knew it, but my dad believed her. Katie had been a sickly child, which, of course, worked to her advantage. Even when she grew older and stopped being frequently ill, she continued to play the chronically unwell card to avoid any household responsibilities. As a result, I had to do all the chores while she lay in her room doing nothing. It was incredibly frustrating, but if I didn't do the work, nobody would. My father came home tired from work, and I didn't want to bother him. When I turned 18, I left for college, and my life finally started to improve because I no longer had to live under the same roof as my sister. After college, we barely communicated. I didn't like her, and we never truly got along. She not only dumped all the work on me, but was also a generally unpleasant person. She constantly made snide remarks, tried to provoke me, and was just overall irritating. So, I was happy to no longer live with her. Yes, I miss my father, but I wasn't willing to sacrifice my mental health to stay with my family. Despite his favoritism towards Katie, I actually had a decent relationship with my dad. That said, I never let him walk all over me. I always stood up for myself when he crossed the line. Over the years, we had many arguments about his attitude toward Katie, but in the end, he was still my father, and we always made up. I met my fiancée, Andy, in college, and after almost 8 years of being together, we finally decided to get married this year. Both of us are doing well in our careers, so it seemed like the right time for a wedding. The same can't be said for my sister. Recently, Katie has been struggling. She moved back in with our father. After finishing school, she lived on her own for a few years, but last year she quit her job to start a jewelry business with a friend. Unfortunately, things didn't go well. They didn't do any research or plan properly. They just jumped in without thinking it through. Unsurprisingly, it all failed. They spent all their money, mostly borrowed from family and friends, and didn't earn anything. Katie had already left her job, and after the business failed, they had to close it down. Since then, Katie has been unemployed. It's been almost 6 months, and she hasn't even tried to find a new job. She's completely dependent on our father. He had planned to retire in a few years, but I don't think that's possible now because he has to support her. This led to a recent argument between us. I think my father should tell Katie to find a job because she can't just live off an elderly parent for her entire life, wallowing over one failed business project. She needs to pull herself together and start doing something with her life. But my father says she just needs time to recover emotionally before she can take on something new. We have completely opposite views on this issue, so we try to avoid discussing it to prevent more fights. To make things worse, I got engaged just a few weeks after Katie's business failed, and my father sees this as another reason. Why is she so upset? Even her younger sister is succeeding in life, while she often can't even bring herself to get out of bed. I know for a fact that my sister is jealous of me because she doesn't hesitate to show it on social media. She makes it look like all the misery in the world has fallen solely on her. Whenever someone responds to her posts, which are clearly a cry for help, she mentions how well I'm doing and says that everything I have should have been hers instead of mine. According to her, I've achieved everything because I'm manipulative and willing to step on others to get ahead. Obviously, that's not true. I'm where I am because of my hard work and efforts. She, on the other hand, is where she is because she loves playing the victim, even though she's responsible for most of the bad things that have happened to her. That said, there may be one exception. 3 weeks ago, her cat, who had been with her for nearly 15 years, passed away. She was deeply attached to the cat, and it was devastating for her. Naturally, Katie was overwhelmed with grief, and Dad told me she was doing so poorly that I started to feel sorry for her. I won't lie, I wanted to support her and express my condolences, but I didn't want to come off as insincere. So, I just asked Dad to pass along my words. At any rate, Katie was already in a pretty depressive state, and when her cat died, she refused to eat for several days. Dad literally begged her to get out of bed and keep going. I genuinely felt sorry for her, but I was too busy preparing for my wedding, which was only a couple of weeks away. So, I decided not to get involved. I stayed in touch with Dad and comforted him when he was particularly upset about Katie's behavior, but that was the extent of what I could manage. I didn't think any of this would affect me directly, but a few days ago, my father called me and said he wouldn't be able to walk me down the aisle on my wedding day. Naturally, I'd assumed he would, but I wanted to formally ask him. The day before the call, I asked if he'd do me the honor, and I thought he'd agree right away. Instead, he said he needed time to think, which I found suspicious. The next day, he called back to decline. When I asked why, because it made no sense, his reason completely floored me. He told me that Katie had cremated her cat a few weeks ago, and now wanted to scatter the ashes on a beach in Hawaii. A couple of years ago, she had traveled there with friends, and the cat had been with her. Apparently, she has very fond memories of the place, and it's special to her. The day of my wedding falls exactly 1 month after her cat's death, so she decided that's when she wanted to scatter the ashes. Not only did my dad refuse to walk me down the aisle, but he also said he wouldn't even attend my wedding. He said he was really sorry and wanted to make it up to me later, but he needed to go with Katie because this was the first time in weeks that she'd expressed any desire to do something or leave the house. She specifically asked him to come with her because she needed emotional support. I was furious when I heard this, but I tried to stay calm. I suggested that one of her friends go with her, or that she delay it by even just a day so that Dad could be at my wedding. I wanted at least one parent to be there on this important day. But Dad said Katie was adamant about her decision, and he'd already offered those alternatives. He wanted to attend my wedding, but when he suggested other dates to Katie, she accused him of not caring about her feelings. According to her, I'll have plenty of people who love me around on my wedding day, but she only has Dad. She thinks she should be the priority because she's going through such a hard time. When my father said he agreed that, in her situation, she should be the priority, I completely lost it. I told him that Katie has been his priority her entire life, and it doesn't surprise me that he's abandoning me on my wedding day to be with her. I didn't even give him a chance to say anything else. I just hung up and blocked him everywhere. I was incredibly upset, and when I told Andy about it, he completely understood how I felt. I cried a lot over the next 2 days, but then I decided to get back at my father and do something I knew would hurt him deeply. Since I realized my sister was playing psychological games with me and trying to get under my skin, I decided to do something that would anger both of them. Instead of continuing to cry, I decided to ask my uncle to walk me down the aisle. My uncle is my father's twin brother, and they absolutely hate each other. I've known this since childhood and have witnessed how spiteful they can be when they're together. At every family gathering, they would try to outdo each other, creating an awkward atmosphere for everyone else. My grandparents tried their best to calm them down, but their hatred for each other was so intense that it was practically impossible. Over time, they seemed to cool off, but after my mother passed away, my father stopped attending any events where he might see my uncle. Personally, I've never had anything against my uncle. I could even understand him, because I knew what it was like to hate your sibling. But we were never particularly close. After that call with my father, I was so angry that I deliberately reached out to my uncle and asked him to walk me down the aisle. He was quite surprised when I asked and said he wasn't sure if we were close enough for such a role. But I told him I was doing it to get back at my father for what he'd done to me. After that, he didn't need much convincing. He agreed as soon as he realized it would anger my dad. My uncle even laughed when I asked if he'd like to be a part of this. Despite being over 50, he said he'd never pass up a chance to spite his brother. So, we agreed to make a post about it that would inevitably reach my father. That same evening, I wrote a post thanking my uncle for agreeing to walk me down the aisle. A few hours later, my father called me. I had unblocked him specifically for this conversation. As soon as he got through, he said he was deeply hurt that I would even think to approach his brother and replace him with that man of all people. He said he convinced Katie to postpone scattering her cat's ashes, but now, all I needed to do was agree to let him walk me down the aisle, because it would be extremely humiliating and offensive for him to see his brother do it while he was still alive and well. I replied that he'd had his chance and had chosen Katie over me. Now, I was just repaying him in kind. He was very upset and said I was being petty. I agreed. I was being petty and childish, but that only made him angrier. By the end of the conversation, he was crying and saying he never expected such behavior from me, all because he was trying to support my depressed sister, who was having a much harder time than I was. He said I lacked compassion, and was being truly cruel because my sister had literally lost everything, and I couldn't even let her have her father for one day. Now, I'm starting to think that maybe I did go too far because there was some truth to my father's words. My sister really has lost a lot. So, I need your opinion. Should I apologize to my father or not? Was I wrong to ask my uncle to walk me down the aisle after my father refused because he needed to accompany my sister to Hawaii on my wedding day? Let's pause this story, and let me know in the comments what you think. Now, let's move on to the update. Update 1. There are only 2 days left until the wedding, and you know what? I'm just going to walk myself down the aisle, so I don't have to deal with this drama anymore. I think it's even more fitting to walk alone because, in the end, I've realized that in life, I can only rely on myself. I spoke to my uncle, and since we already got the reaction we wanted from my father, he said it's fine. Now, he'll just be a guest at the wedding, as originally intended. He doesn't mind because, from the start, he was skeptical about the idea of walking me down the aisle. I also sent my father a message because a phone conversation would probably lead to another argument. In the message, I said he's welcome to come to the wedding, but he doesn't need to walk me down the aisle. I also told him that if he chooses to go to Hawaii with Katie instead, that's his decision. However, I made it clear that if he does, I'll have to permanently cut ties with him because he's had enough chances to prove that I'm important to him too, and every time, he's let me down. I'm no longer willing to tolerate such disrespect. I want to get married and be happy on my wedding day. I've already spent too much time worrying about what he thinks and how others will perceive my decisions. It's been a colossal waste of time because he's never cared about how I feel. If he truly cared, he wouldn't have dropped this news on me just a few days before the wedding. And if he cared, he would have apologized after I sent him the message. He didn't even bother to reply. I discussed this with Andy, and he agreed that I made the right decision. With only a couple of days left until the wedding, we still hadn't resolved anything with my father. At this point, I just don't see any other way forward. Update 2. Well, first of all, I got married yesterday. I still can't believe it. I'm actually married. It feels so surreal, and I'm incredibly happy right now. It's unpleasant to go back to thinking about my father and sister, but I promised you an update, and this time, it'll be detailed. Last time, I just poured out my emotions and left it at that. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, my father didn't come to the wedding. As far as I know, he went to Hawaii with Katie to scatter her late cat's ashes. Yes, that's what he chose instead of attending his other daughter's wedding. Honestly, I don't even want to dive into this because some people have already judged me for supposedly not taking my sister's depression seriously. Listen, I genuinely feel sorry for her. Depression is a horrible thing, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Ironically, that's Katie. But this isn't about her depression. Her decision to go to Hawaii on my wedding day wasn't caused by her depression. It was driven by her obsessive need to be the center of attention, and to oppose me at every opportunity. She could have waited a few days, or done it earlier, but no, she chose my wedding day. I'm certain it wasn't a coincidence. She's always had an issue with me, and I refuse to believe this was just an innocent expression of her grief. Depression might explain her actions, but it doesn't excuse them. So yes, I won't let her off the hook just because she's struggling right now. As for my father, that's a different story. Honestly, I don't even know what to say about him, other than that he let me down again. And this time, I'm not going to forgive him. It won't be easy going through life knowing I don't have parents who support me, but let's be honest, I never really had his support to begin with. For him, it was always Katie. And now, that's abundantly clear. I was foolish to believe anything could change. He chose not to come to my wedding, and he did it in the most cowardly way. He didn't inform me until after the ceremony was over. Until the last moment, I wasn't sure if he'd show up. I had sent him a message in advance, but he never replied. I kept checking my phone, but when I walked down the aisle and the ceremony was finished, I realized he wasn't coming. Only then did he finally send me a message. In the message, he said he was in Hawaii with Katie and had decided to attend the scattering ceremony because Katie needed him more than I did. He said she was more emotionally dependent on him, and that he was sorry, but hoped I'd understand his decision. Maybe his message would have seemed sincere if he hadn't added that my petty behavior with the whole uncle situation had pushed him away. He said he thought it was better if we didn't talk for a while, and that was also part of why he decided not to come. I won't deny that my behavior was petty. But honestly, the only reason I acted that way was because I've always felt forgotten since my mom passed away. I won't pretend my actions weren't childish, but what else could I have done? I just wanted to make him angry, so I could see if I mattered to him at all. Maybe I do matter, but clearly not enough for him to come to my wedding. Either way, that message really hurt me, especially because it was on my wedding day. I wanted to be happy, so I just blocked him and continued enjoying this celebration. He had already made his choice not to come to the wedding, so sending me a message to confirm it felt unnecessary. The guests, of course, asked why my father and sister weren't at the wedding, and I decided to be completely honest with them. I told them the real reason. It felt like this situation cast a shadow over them, not me, so I had no reason to hide anything. Most people were simply shocked. Some even found the situation absurd. In any case, now almost the entire family knows that my father missed my wedding to go to Hawaii with Katie and scatter her cat's ashes. He couldn't make time for me on this one single day, which, in my opinion, is his greatest failure as a father. But despite all of this, I had a fantastic time, and nothing can change that. My wedding day will always remain the happiest day of my life. Now, I'm starting a new chapter with the person I love most in the world, and I've made a firm decision. From now on, he will be my only family. Update 3. It's been a week since my wedding. In a few days, Andy and I are going on our honeymoon, but apparently my father and Katie can't come to terms with the fact that I'm happy. They decided now is the perfect time to share their thoughts about me telling the wedding guests why they weren't there. 3 days ago, Katie sent me a message. I hadn't blocked her, only my father. But after reading it, I wanted to block her too. It infuriated me that she suddenly felt she had the moral high ground. For context, the only reason I haven't blocked her yet is that if something happens to my father, I want to know about it. Despite our differences, I'm sure she would inform me if there were a serious issue, an accident, illness, or something else. She's my only potential source of information about him. I know many would advise me to cut all ties completely, but I don't think I can do that. Just because my father was a terrible parent doesn't mean I have to be a terrible daughter. Maybe it doesn't make sense to some, but it's my moral principle, and I intend to stick to it. So please don't comment on this decision. Now, on to the message she sent me. Here it is. *Hi. We just got back from Hawaii, and many of our relatives have already contacted us. They think we were wrong to choose your wedding day to scatter my cat's ashes. I'm not surprised you told everyone this story and painted us in a negative light, but I'm sad that you keep attacking me even though you know how hard things are for me right now. I really hoped you wouldn't smear me and Dad because we're your family, and you, of all people, should understand how hard it is to lose someone you love. I hoped you'd show more sympathy toward me, but clearly, that didn't happen. Dad also noticed that you blocked him, and he's very upset about it. I think you should fix this. Honestly, all I want to say is that you should be more considerate of us. You can't just live thinking only about yourself and expect everyone to accept it. I hope you understand what I mean and apologize. But if you don't, I won't be surprised because if you can't even see me during this tough time, expecting anything more from you is pointless. Honestly, this message enraged me, not just because of its condescending tone, but also because of the complete lack of self-awareness. She paints herself as the victim without even considering what I've been through. Clearly, she has no empathy for me and continues to put herself on a pedestal. The tone of the message made my blood boil, and as for its content, I won't even start on that, or I might start insulting her right here. It was so pompous and soaked in self-importance that I honestly wanted to block her. But after long consideration, I decided to calmly compose a response and sent her the following. *Hi, Katie. Yes, I did tell our relatives why you and Dad weren't at my wedding. I decided to be honest because I'm not a liar. Moreover, by choosing not to attend my wedding, you put yourselves in this position. I think it's unfair to expect me to hide the truth about why you were absent, especially in circumstances where you both showed complete indifference toward me. Neither of you could think of me on my wedding day and put me first for once in your lives. Therefore, I see no reason to apologize. If Dad is upset about being blocked, he should have thought about that earlier, not regret it now. I've already made my decision, and I don't want to maintain contact with either of you. So I kindly ask you not to message or call me unless it's truly urgent. In such a case, you can contact me. But if it's not an emergency, I don't want you to disturb me. I have no desire to communicate with you or Dad. You both caused me a lot of pain over the years, and I agree with what Dad said. We should keep our distance for a while. I'm now a married woman, and for the next few years, I want to focus on enjoying my life with my husband. He is now my only family. I wish you both all the best. Goodbye. I showed this message to Andy before sending it, and he agreed with every word. Katie replied a few minutes later, saying she respects my decision. She also added that Dad is still very upset about me cutting him off, but that's not my problem anymore. They brought this on themselves. I'm sure Katie is even relieved that she doesn't have to deal with me anymore. If Dad is truly so distraught, well, that's his own doing, and I'm no longer responsible for it. In any case, I'm just going to enjoy my honeymoon now. Andy and I have been planning it for a long time, and I deserve to spend this time happily. Let me know what you think of this story in the comments. As for my opinion, it's clear who's the reasonable person and who isn't in this situation. But I think cutting all ties with my father might have been too much. What's the point? Just don't call him, and that's it. Making it demonstrative doesn't seem necessary. I had a similar experience with a friend once, and now I kind of regret it.